There are many aspects to the entertainment industry as it exists today, be it video games, television, movies. But one of the more interesting ones, especially for those of us who grew up in the 80s or those of us who had the luxury of living in Florida and went to theme parks very often, is the fascinating world of animatronics. And there's probably no better person to talk to about that than our guest today, a man who's been in this business for decades, who has seen it develop and evolve. And I'm totally looking forward to this conversation. So welcome to the show, John Wood.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Carl.
No problem. So we like to do our chronological look at things here at the show. So I always like to start off by asking people about their educational background, just to get an idea of where you started and maybe what you were looking forward to or wanting to do before you got sidetracked.
Well, right out of college, I had a job waiting for me, and I went to school in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Wake Forest University, a small school in the South. Got a liberal arts degree in history and economics. Went to work for a real estate investment trust initially, and was moving in the real estate world, but it was 1977, and from 1977 to 79, prime rate went from 7 to 20. And I lost my job as a result at the end of that, and I was looking around for my next career step. I was considering going back to school and getting a law degree. I had also looked at other things in the real estate world. One of my associates from that first job had offered me an opportunity to come work with him building homes. And I thought I might be interested in that until I looked into it a little bit further, and it really wasn't me. But he said, my next door neighbor and I are working on an idea of a new company building and selling robots. Would you be interested in that? I said, you guys are crazy. What are you talking about? Robots? Yep. Come on over and see our prototypes. So I went over to this gentleman's garage where they had 4 moving and talking mannequins in construction. They had already established the name, registered the name. At the time, it was called Sally Unlimited, Inc., and which I've never really liked the name, but I'm stuck with it. And we played around with those mannequins, and they were really special. You could record your own program on this particular device that recorded not only the movements, but also the sound. And we had a voice-activated mouth, so it simulated, if you talked appropriately, simulated a mouth movement, and it would literally stop traffic if we were to put it out on the road in the late 70s.
Now, I hate to interrupt. I'll probably end up doing it a lot. Just to go back so we get some details here. Now, which state are you in? You're not in, are you already in Florida at the time?
Jacksonville, okay. Florida is my home. I came back to Jacksonville after graduating. It was my power base, if you would. I knew the people in this area. I wanted to come back I wasn't going to work anywhere further north than North Carolina. I made that decision and could always visit the snow and other colder, but Florida appealed to me climatically. So that 1974 is when I graduated from college. 1977 is when I decided to join the ranks at Sally. We opened our offices January 1978, and I joined with the idea that I would become a partner if we could make it work. And so we set out to try to market and sell and promote these animatronic figures, and with some success.
Now, the people who were already at the company before you joined, were they exclusively technical people, or was there already somebody thinking about a business model here?
Well, there were 3 Johns that started the company named Sally. A gentleman named John Rob Holland was really the brains behind the bunch. He was a dentist, but a frustrated engineer, one that wanted to work at NASA until they started laying off the people at NASA during that period of time. And then he decided he'd want to go ahead and be a dentist like his father and his brother, and he joined their practice. But this was an unusual dentist. He was building his own airplane while he was finishing dental school. And it was in his garage where he had his airplane and was doing the finishing touches that he also had a box up on the shelf labeled Sally. And his neighbor said, "What's in the box?" And he pulled out this very crude electromechanical device that was molded off of a girl's face and that he had used in dental school for a presentation that floored everyone. And they decided to use this character, Sally, during Halloween. Attracted all kinds of people and made them both excited about the possibility that a robot company could make it. And so,
now, yeah. So now, obviously, you're in Florida. It's the 70s. Disney's got Epcot. When did Epcot open? It was
no, it was just the Magic Kingdom was open by that time.
Okay.
Disney was open by that time.
Gotcha. So does that have any influence on the fact that, he built this robot? I mean, or is it just pure coincidence that you're both in Florida? I mean, Jacksonville's not next to Orlando by any means, but
no, I think it's just coincidence. And we stayed in Jacksonville because it was our home and we liked the place. And besides that, he had his dental practice here and the other guy had his home building business here. And even though they were only part-time partners, they were still involved in those early days. John Fox stayed with us for 5 years, but then went back to building homes. John Rob Holland stayed part-time 10 years until his dental practice. His father passed away and he had to take on a lot more patients. And so I was able to buy back their stock and after 10 years. So as a 47-year-old company, I've been the last of the Mohicans, if you would, for 37 years. Since it brought on a great team of people and we've continued to work. Our good fortune was that as the novelty wore out on animatronic figures, Chuck E. Cheese came on board and stimulated the market for anyone who was building moving and talking figures. And we had to shift our gears from building single and double characters that could talk and look like humans into creating a system that would control up to 10 characters on 3 stages with curtains and lights. And got to realize that we had to develop our own control systems in those days. It was not a computer when we first started. We actually had to buy a Heathkit to do our own Z80 base computer to help us with our first programming.
I was going to ask, so the very first Sally is an electromechanical device. So I'm guessing, could it talk at all, or was it purely movement?
No, audio animatronics required the synchronization of audio with the animation. That was the key. Moving from rote animation that was all mechanical linkage and routine, programmable animation and coordinated audio was a whole new world. And the only people that we thought were doing it were Disney. We found out shortly there were others in the world that were building moving and talking figures too, but it was all inspired by Disney and the appeal that animatronics had. But in the early days, we had no aspirations of being another Disney company. We really felt that animatronics could be used in many more applications. And Disney had proven that at the World's Fair by promoting other products, creating different types of uses for it, and educated people and entertained them at the same time. And we certainly thought that it had the ability to go into museums, to be able to be used in retail, a variety of applications in those early days.
And that is an interesting question because obviously once you've got the tech, and we will have to go into the tech a little bit more, but the initial idea of who the market is for this. Obviously the plethora of potential people is huge, but who was your primary target market at the very beginning of the company? And did you narrow it down, and what were the considerations that led to that particular goal?
Well, it's hard to remember unless you lived it back in the 70s and 60s, but display animation was a big deal. And window store displays were still elaborate, sophisticated, and fun for people to go and enjoy in the wintertime, the Christmas time. So we went initially to the display industry show, NADI in New York, where mannequins were sold, where window store animations were sold. We really believed that initially that we could replace maybe 1 out of 10 mannequins with a moving and talking mannequin that could talk about the products that they were wearing. Turned out that was a flawed business idea, but it was one that initiated our business plan. It was having to create, we were selling a tool like a slide projector that you could load your own program in and you could change it daily or operate like an electronic puppet and talk through the character if you wanted to do that, which was a lot of fun as well with a hidden microphone and a video camera. But when Chuck E. Cheese came along, we recognized that that was a longer generation and opportunity, and we had to raise some money in order to change technology, change techniques for the animation. The electric motors that we were using to move an arm or character from the waist was not as robust as required for a restaurant application for every 15 minutes and playing musical instruments. So we developed technologies that would not only control more bits of information, but also pneumatics instead of electromechanical devices, and made that transition successfully and developed a show called Mark Twain's Riverboat Playhouse as our first, starring Daniel and the Dixie Diggers, a Dixieland Jazz Hound Dog Band, and Mark Twain. We were successful in selling that to a number of locations. A couple of chains even bought into the program. And we started developing those, and Bubba Bear and the Badland Band, and Billy Joe and the Bluegrass Bears, and Ursula and the Papas, and Mr. Beaks and the Tropical Tweeters, and a variety of other musical shows. And then Chuck E. Cheese overexpanded, trying to compete with Showbiz, and filed Chapter 11. And that was a whole big sticky wicket that changed our life. We lost contracts there, people forfeited deposits, and all of a sudden, where we thought we were getting a whole new breath of fresh air, we were scrambling to make things continue. But in the interim, we had learned about this association called IAPA, the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. And in 1978, we went to our first IAPA. And there, we didn't have an educational process like we did in the display industry show. We weren't trying to break in with new technology. We were bringing in a more affordable way to do a Disney-like technology. So these people embraced us. They bought our product immediately, even though as individuals, we had Elvis and Santa Claus and a pirate with a bird on his shoulder and a professor and a space character. We only had 800 square feet of production space, but we rented 300 square feet at the show and took everything except the kitchen sink to show off, and really had a warm reception. We were so excited to find a market that understood what we were trying to do. And we sold our animation there, but also our animated musical shows. We put Daniel with Dixie Diggers in Hershey Park and in Riverside Park and Adventureland, a variety of parks around the country and even some overseas. So it kept us established in the theme park arena. And we used that to land a very big project with Six Flags called the Power Plant Project in Baltimore, which was their attempt to create an urban entertainment center in the Baltimore Harbor, where the old power plant was. They hired Gary Goddard and Tony Christopher, then Landmark, or it was Gary Gardner Productions at the time, to do the design for this very elaborate and unfortunately unsuccessful new venture. But in there, they had a 73 character show that
Wow.
they wanted someone to build, and we won the award to do it by very aggressively bidding and needing the job in order to stay in business.
Now, which year approximately would this have been?
84, 85.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's after Chuck E. Cheese has collapsed. It's after the coin-op business is gone. The coin-op video game business has collapsed. So, okay, I can definitely see why, this contract is important.
It was very important to us and very hard on us. I mean, now not only do we have to create a device that could control more bits, but we had to be able to mostly have an editing system so that we could edit the bits on all of those programs. We were still putting information on tape that was coincidentally playing with the audio tracks. So a 4-track or an 8-track reel-to-reel was usually our way of providing the data and the audio program to all of our shows.
Okay, and I think we need to go back a couple steps here then with the technology before we get into all of the details there, because there's got to be an evolution of the tech here. So the first models that you're building in the late 70s, you mentioned you used the Heath kit.
Well, we used the Heath kit actually when we made the move from what would be called encode decode technology or tone generated. We used actually a Bell telephone system with 16 tones, just like a touch tone telephone, that one tone would generate a relay or 2 relays and would activate then the motor to move in a certain direction. So we were limited to movements in those original programmer boxes because we only had 16 bits to work with. And we could switch that and maybe use 2 characters, but they were highly limited in the functionality. An animated musical show, we went to 132-bit, Z80-based, FSK sine wave type signal, one that could discern 132 bits on one track of tape and control 132 things out there. With a variety of switching techniques, then developing the editing system, we were able to control 73 characters on these. There were 3 rotating stages. There were 5 rotating stages. I'm sorry. There were 4 drops with animation, and it was called the Magic Lantern Theater, and it was extremely elaborate and real test of our technology and our techniques, but mostly the art. All these were custom designed by an ex-Disney artist, beautiful artist, Mark Davis, and we then went through and built these beautiful characters starring Electro and Proto, and it was a circus theme show that was their big main attraction in the overall Baltimore power plant.
Fascinating. Now, so you're using, just so I can understand the tech a little bit behind this, and I got to ask, I mean, you're coming from a liberal arts background, economics, you worked in economics and history, and you worked in real estate. Someone with a history associate's degree, a business bachelor's degree, and a law degree who's worked in real estate. What kind of learning curve was the tech for you?
Well, in truth, John Rob Holland was the tech guy. He was the gentleman that could move forward in technology and also have the mechanical capabilities to help us with our first one. John Fox was supposed to be the business guy behind the business, and I was always going to be the rainmaker, the sales guy, the one to go out and promote and market it. I have been careful to avoid becoming a techno because I'm just not made that way. I've always used my art and creativity and line of BS to be able to attract buyers and interested prospects to buy from Sally. we were a good company, and we would be able to deliver what we said we could deliver, and gained a reputation to do that. So we were able to successfully stay in the industry, learn about the industry, love the industry. The industry is fun, and the people in it at the time were largely independent family entrepreneurs, and those that could relate to us and we could relate to them. I was so disappointed when Six Flags and Cedar Point decided to expand their reach and turn many of these family parks into corporate parks, and then had to deal with the corporations as opposed to the entrepreneurs that were out there that I could relate to better. Even so, we were successful. With the success of the Six Flags project, we recognized that we could do a big project, and yet did not like the process. We went on to win a bid to do a significant amount of ET for Universal Studios, and did that in Florida and in California. Those three experiences, though, made me more of an entrepreneur to want to control my own destiny. And so instead of waiting for some other design group to design darkride, sorry, I had to get rid of a call coming in. We, instead of waiting for the others to design it and then us go to bid and having to be a very competitive bid, we decided that, heck, there's nobody designing dark rides. There's been a void since Disney developed the higher quality dark rides, but we've got the stars of the show. We've got the secret to the ingredient, to the recipe. Let's start designing dark rides that feature our animatronics. And so we entered the marketplace with a revolutionary new idea, an interactive dark ride, one that combined the age-old success of a shooting gallery with a storytelling experience like the old dark rides were. And so it was our mantra, if you would. We went up to New York, got rights to Ghostbusters from Columbia Pictures briefly, designed a dark ride around the idea of Ghostbusters and an interactive concept, and really got a lot of recognition and attention, and launched our company. Even though we didn't sell Ghostbusters, we were ahead of our time there, and I think we would have been in trouble if we had sold it, because I'm not too sure we could have executed that one. But it did shift the paradigm from being an animated band company into being a dark ride company. And that was 35 years ago or so. And we started designing dark rides and had people come to us and say, can you redo our dark ride, or can you design us a ride? And so we started creating dark ride experiences, but we found that the higher cost of a Disney quality with 30, 40, 50 animatronic figures just wasn't in the cards. And so we had a customer contact us from Myrtle Beach, say, I want a dark ride, but I don't want to spend that kind of money. I like your interactive concept. What do you think we could do for, $1 million instead of $10 million? And I said, I'm not sure, but let me investigate it. Let me see if we can't do something like a Mr. Toad's Wild Ride that doesn't feature animatronics, but features a lot of reliable, fun animation and gags like a typical dark ride. So we developed the Great Pistolero Roundup, mostly because they wanted to convert a Mexican restaurant into this dark rides venue, and it already had architectural theming that we were taking advantage of. So we created a Tex-Mex concept where the nasty pistoleros had stolen the gold from the Banco Nacional, and the federales recruited us to go help recover the gold and put those banditos behind bars. So the Great Pistolero was born. Using that as a template, we also designed the Den of Lost Thieves, which was a pirate theme for a client in the Philippines, and who didn't understand the Mexican idea, but pirates were somewhat universal. And then we sold a couple of those and had a couple of pistoleros out there, and had an American group, the people that owned at that time or ran Lake Compounds and Mall of America show an interest in doing what we call ghost hunt or ghost blasters. And so our blacklight, same technique with a lot of three-dimensional sets, but two-dimensional animation was born, and that became our big seller. It also converted quite easily into the Scooby-Doo attractions that we built a number of for Cedar Fair and for Six Flags and for Warner Brothers. And then we were somewhat launched at that stage of the game and started building dark rides of all shapes and sizes all over the world.
Now, I do have to ask here because, we'll probably have to come back to the tech a little bit later on, but so the story elements, the writing process that went into something like the cartoon character bands or standalone characters that could entertain a crowd, that's a very specific talent because those jokes, those lines have to land. You can't, brush it off because it's going to have to be repeated over and over again and so forth. What was the process like to find the writing talent to make sure that not just the animatronic looked good, but that the content would survive beyond beyond the effect of, oh, this thing moves and it moves really well, cool. That's going to wear thin relatively quickly. You're going to have the content as well. What was that process like at the beginning to find those people, figure out what works and what doesn't work? What was that process like?
Well, Carl, you're absolutely correct in that we found ourselves as three businessmen then cast into a role of being entertainers. And while we were competent in developing the business program and the marketing and even the technology, we lacked truly at that stage of the game the in-house entertainment capabilities. We recruited, fortunately, a beautiful lady named Jan Sherman, who was willing to do all the cattle call. And I had envisioned the characters. I'd worked with the designer. I came up with the names of the band members and the characters that were going to be in the show. But writing the scripts and producing the music was a whole nother world. And so Jan joined the group and as a consultant initially. And I knew after sitting through 2 or 3 of those studio sessions that was not my cup of tea. And we hired Jan full time after that process. She continued to write our scripts for all of our shows. I continued to devise the characters and what we would produce. But she would fill in all of the blanks and write the jokes and help me produce the music that we needed. So she was quite good. She'd work with the different composers and the arrangers and the musicians and find those that could do the spoken words as well as the singing parts and sound like the characters that they were supposed to sound like and the personalities that they were supposed to represent. Jan passed away a few years ago. Her last production for us, over 10 years ago now, but her last production for us was, let me think. I'm not real sure, but we've since built a couple of animated musical shows. I'd really rather build dark rides. They're easier for us now without Jan. We had to find another creative consultant that was excellent with music and working with scripting and the like. But animated musical show, the last animated musical shows we produced have been for Chimelong in China, and creating a penguin show called Penguins on Parade for the Chinese youth and kids was just a tough challenge for us, the Americans, and to make sure that it was successful. I'm happy to say that we have 3 or 4 animated shows over at Chimelong now. The first one was actually called The White Tiger Show, and it featured realistic looking animals that would sing, and we used some of the songs that we had created for our dragon band, Merlin and the Music Makers, or some of the original music, and then got it translated into Chinese and found the right talent to do that voices, but whew, that's tough. We did the Penguins on Parade the same kind of way. And then there was a Panda show where we were finally able to tell them, you produce the show, we'll produce the animatronics, and our life will be easier. And so it was the last one we produced for them.
Gotcha. And okay, so that is interesting. Now, how much of the skills of developing the content for a standalone show were translatable to the dark rides, and how much relearning of what makes an interesting dark ride versus what makes an entertaining show was there?
Well, my appetite for creating dark rides was huge. I loved them. I'm a big Disney fan. I was at the 1964 World's Fair. I was out at Disneyland.
Wow.
14 after that and enjoyed their first Pirates of the Caribbean. I was enamored with animatronics, and it was probably the reason why I decided that I'd join these other two guys and make it work. So I went on every dark ride I could find. Went to Germany and rode all the ones at the Oktoberfest with Dick Chance. We were looking at collaborating as possible partnership there to develop dark rides. And I took note of things that worked for me. And dark rides are not only an escape from reality, but it's also a shock to the senses if it's good. And gags were the key to that. So our first dark ride designs reflect a lot of my design influence. Mine have Lost Souls. Every scene's got a specific gag. Challenge of Tutankhamun, also the same way. And these series of gags and have been passed on to our creative teams. The special effects play a vital role, just as vital, if not more important, than the animatronics themselves. Somehow, during a good dark ride, you need to create a sensation. You need to change the emotion, if you can, of the rider to scream, to laugh, to cry, to smile, to do something that they wouldn't do normally if it hadn't been affected by the show experience itself. And so, having music, having good lighting, having good animation, and a good little storyline, a good pace to the attraction, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Writing the story was a little bit easier for a dark ride, but making it entertaining was just as much of a challenge.
Gotcha. And as someone who's been on plenty of dark rides over the years, I totally understand that. Now, the interactive elements, like the shooting galleries, for example, how is that balance, or was that a difficult balance to achieve then? Because you're trying to control the emotion, but also trying to give the illusion of influence.
Well, it was a lot harder than I thought it would when I was trying to sell that Ghostbusters original dark ride. I thought we just would go with some of the best shooting gallery people, but shooting galleries are a wired station. There was no need to have a moving cart. Creating an effective gun and targeting system that was from a moving vehicle, wirelessly, accurately depicting who hit the target, who gets the score, and having something that was satisfying to the customer from a reliability standpoint was another major technological challenge for us. Fortunately, we had a gentleman who had helped us through that editing system I told you about and the process of creating what we called the ACS 1000, the 132-bit controller. We brought him back in and said, this is what we need to do. What do you think? And he was able to help us develop our first interactive systems. Butch Shadwell was his name, is his name still. And it was a infrared-based, very, very similar technology to what you'd use on a remote control for your TV in those days. Communication device that was good enough to satisfy the New Jersey gaming convention when we decided we wanted to do a redemption game with our interactive ride by the score. They had to have something that was accurate and it was not to be cheated on, and you couldn't, cheat the system, basically, was their key issue. But then the other requirements, not only was it restricted to how many guns we could have in one area and still do that job, but it wasn't a smart system. It was just give you the accuracy right there in your scoreboard, but not anywhere else. So we then had to develop a second interactive system, and this one was first employed for the Labyrinth of the Minotaur in Terra Mítica, Spain, back in year 2000. And here we had over 50 animatronic figures. It was before the interactive video media development, and it was all practical. Our targeting system now could have various different target values associated with targets. In addition, we could communicate to the ride system so that we could impact or affect the show. So on Challenge of Tutankhamun, based on your ride play, there were 3 different endings that you could achieve. And if you didn't get a high enough score, you didn't see the end of the show. You were out of the ride right before the finale. And you had to ride it again if you didn't want to be cursed. So it generated a reason for repeat ridership. But that was the key reason for the interactivity. When I went around to parks and asked them why they didn't have a dark ride, not only was it hard for them, it was easy for them to buy a ride, but not easy for them. They didn't have the creative teams that Disney did or even Universal in those days. And so it was not an easy thing. You know, dark ride started out as kind of a homemade tunnel in the dark. I had old Tom Spackman at Indiana Beach said the perfect dark ride was one you just turned off the lights and there wasn't anything in there that people could vandalize. Well, obviously that wasn't anything that anybody wanted. And we were there to make sure that new dark rides carried a story, carried a theme, and had a whole different level of sophistication to it.
Gotcha. So, okay, and this question of the clients and being able to either build it themselves, maintain it, or even pay for it, because you did mention, you know, the cost, and you dropped this idea of, you know, 1 million versus 10 million, for example. We're not dealing here with very cheap stuff. Going back to the initial animatronics that you were selling, late 70s, early 80s, these were still not cheap devices.
Well, at those stages of the game, you could buy an animatronic figure from us for $7,000.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, now you're buying the animatronic. Obviously, you're also buying the content, the songs, the programming, and you're using tape for this. Now, did you have something set up for, or at what point did you realize you're going to maybe have to update the software as it goes along?
Well, we were always prepared to. Often we would design a ride that had different themes that could be adapted if the client wanted it. So far, no one has ever decided to do that. It's always been, you know, by the time they want to do something like that, it becomes a traditional ride that everybody would give them a lot of grief if they decided to change. And, you know, I was going to explain that after traveling around and talking to these parks, one of the key reasons is that not only was it hard for them to do, but they would get vandalized. They were abused. And a dark ride, unfortunately, was not that repeatable when it came to a regional park who depended upon people visiting multiple times a summer. The season pass became the driver for the regional park. And I had to come up with a way to make dark rides entertaining year after year. The interactive dark ride is what did the trick. Creating something that you remembered, number one, you remember that Dad beat you the last time and you're ready to beat him this time, or it changed every time because it was a game as well as a ride experience.
Interesting. I never thought about it like that, but yeah, I mean, so, okay. And I guess then we need to talk a little bit about the economics of the clients and how they differ. So And again, sorry, I'm really hung up on chronology here. So, because I'd like to compare those. So, your initial clients for the animatronics, after you've figured out we're not going to sell them to department stores for their window displays, you're selling them to mom and pop amusement parks and
Universal.
other things. What?
Yeah, and Universal. We always thought that, we wanted to try to work with Disney and Universal until we did. And then we realized that it wasn't that much fun working with Disney and Universal after you've done it. And it was a lot more fun. One of the things we're working with Disney and Universal is we were just an animatronics company for them. We weren't allowed to bid on the show or create the deal. We were just part of the picks and a piece of the puzzle. As I said before, I really wasn't comfortable trying to gauge my future on the success of others getting there. So I liked also just the fulfilling aspect of it being a Sally ride, of it being our production and our success, as opposed to a Disney or Universal success. So we set out to do that. We went from those retail guys. We did have some success still with them. Even when we were building the Baltimore power plant, we were building multiple Elsie the Cows for Borden's and Santa Clauses for department stores. But it was not long thereafter that we just abandoned the individual characters and went for both the animated musical shows and the higher ticket item, the dark rides. So.
Gotcha. Now, and here I mentioned this to you before we started recording, and listeners of the show, I've talked about this on the show. There's an interesting article back from June of '84 in Replay magazine for the coin-operated video game industry, talking about how you guys were selling the band. There's a beautiful picture here of the Mississippi Queen stage with all the characters that you've talked about, and at this point, the price they're quoting for an individual character, I believe, is $25,000. Or is that no? For a line of single character shows, the entertainers $25,000, or they could be rented for about $1,000 per month, and then switched out every few months. And I just and that really caught my imagination, because I'm trying to imagine, some small venue that's got, like maybe 20 or 30 video games, some basketball hoops, a kitchen, and they're trying to get kids in for the birthday parties and whatnot. Was that really how big of a part of your business was that kind of clientele, or was that basically just, Chuck E. Cheese has collapsed, everybody is jumping for the board, and we're desperately trying to make this model work for 5 minutes until we get something better?
Carl, you're pretty much on target with that. When we first went to the restaurant show during the heyday of Chuck E. Cheese, we were swamped with prospects, people. I've never had a more exciting trade show application until I went to the game show. And there we had page after page after page of arcade owner that was interested in our animatronics. And that year, I think we did something like 15 shows, because we weren't just doing IAPA, we were doing both the game shows and the restaurant shows. We developed a series of reps in the field that were selling kitchen equipment to restaurants and arcades. And we really tried to expand our selling capabilities in those markets. And when the full-blown animated musical show locations did die off, we started looking at other people that had arcades and pizza restaurants that might be entertaining people like a Chuck E. Cheese, but with a one-man band called the Entertainers. So we sold Colonel Bo as a banjo entertainer, or Hank Winter, or just a couple of our different characters that were designed to be single character entertainers. And I talked one customer, Papa Gino's up in New England, into doing a program where we did 3 of them with 2 character stages, 2 individual character stages. And we would rotate in those entertainers so that they, every 3 months or something, had a new star coming into this. And it worked for a long time for them. And then there was a bit of a rebirth with the family entertainment centers where we, for a group called Celebration Station, we may built 20 different animated shows for them, a reduced Daniel and the Dixie Digger show with Jethro at the birthday stage, which was another single character entertainer that we had created, Jethro P. Hogg, that mostly played the fairs and the like. While we were developing Darkrides, we still took advantage of our entertainment, larger than life animated musical shows.
Gotcha. So so you've got these very different business models, I would call them. And I have to ask now, there's got to be maintenance issues going on with these animatronics, because you're spread out now all over the world. You've got stuff in the Philippines, in China, in Europe, and so on and so forth. And how has your maintenance programs and your maintenance infrastructure have to develop over time?
Well, when our primary market was the restaurant, we didn't have anybody to back up our technical capabilities. So it was the secret to our success has always been in the design of the characters, making it maintenance friendly and easy to understand and non-exotic. A number of our other competitors were chasing the exotic animation that Disney was developing, and yet I knew that the person responsible for my Daniel the Dixie Digger show was also responsible for setting up the salad bar, and that was his main job. And so we had to create a show that you could diagnose if you needed to on the telephone. We had feedback with every bit. We had colored air lines with every valve. We had LED lights so the valves could show. Most characters, if they lost a movement, unless it was the mouth movement, they didn't even realize it for months, but because they all had about 20 movements apiece. But you had to build a show that was robust. You had to build one that the guy that was setting up the salad bar could understand if he opened up the back. And that he could open up and see the devices there with clear plastic bodies and with the airlines and the LEDs and everything inside the character. That was our technique, not subfloor, not somewhere else. The control system was somewhere else and the audio system was somewhere else. But the character had an umbilical cord. All valves and cylinders were inside the character. That technique remained our technique with all of our animation. Ironically, as we designed the more sophisticated, higher power animation control systems, when we went to Darkrides, even though we had more bits to control, they were all isolated in smaller shows. And we had developed a fourth control system we called the Mini Sam, which originally I had designed for had produced for the retail market, and thinking that we could have singing hot dogs in a grocery store. But it had to be very cost effective in order to be something that we could build. You know, when you build custom product and you're the owner of the company, you're always looking for something you can do more than once, or that there's some way to turn a switch and have a consistent market that you could go after and sell to. And so multiple sales were always in our back of our mind. And those that hit the home runs were people like Teddy Ruxpin, who sold thousands of these talking teddy bears, or even Creative Engineering, who landed the systems for Showbiz Pizza and were able to produce these animated shows once a week. We were with Daniel the Dixie Diggers trying to milk those musical shows that we had and we had in the can, and same with all the other shows that we created. Jethro P. Hogg, we've sold dozens of for a variety of different applications and uses. Still entertaining people out there today.
Very cool.
So in a dark ride with this mini SAM, we were able to isolate the different scenes and also use the mini SAM, which was SAM stood for sound and animation control. It had its built-in amplifier, it had a built-in storage for sound, and had the ability to control 32 bits on a small board. And so there were 65 of these mini SAMs in our early pistoleros or ghost blasters. They were, again, consistently used. Same with our mechanical devices. We tried to use the same kind of devices multiple times, but attach different things to them. Pop up, slide out, roll over, different devices that could be easily reproduced and maintained. And while we have a full-time customer service department, it's one that doesn't require us to do much maintenance in the field. When we moved mostly to theme parks, and 95% of our work now is in theme parks, they have a very sophisticated maintenance team that could understand the way we built our animation. And unless it was something cosmetic, which it happens, if a face rips, then they're not real good artists, but they could build anything mechanically or rebuild or see how it was built and repair. So we have not had to go out to the field to most of our theme park applications, particularly around the world.
Interesting. That I would have thought that there'd be more interaction, but I guess you're right. I mean, at theme park, those people know how to do this stuff.
And we focus on intermediate technology instead of exotic technology, where they have to have a special motor made. They could go to Granger's and buy what we were using for our movement devices. They could find it in catalogs. It was all standard in those days. Things have changed a little bit since then, but in those days we attempted to keep everything intermediate to where it would be easy to service for the field.
Now, okay, I've got to follow up then. So you said that things have changed. Is it now not in a catalog, but it's orderable online, or is it more an issue of you do make some more custom pieces?
A lot of our cylinders now are kind of custom created by our cylinder company. That it's not our company, but our supplier. When we have special needs, while they can be reproduced, it's not quite as easy as picking up the catalog and ordering the part. We did have to keep good records. And in those days, we couldn't draw everything. It was just as hard to draw it as it was to build it for us. So we would do photographic documentation and parts lists of all of our animation. We've got libraries full of books for every project that we could go to now and look at the pictures of how we built it. This is in case we get a chance to build it again. If you only had mechanics that wanted to build it the same way that they built it before, which they never do. But be that as it may, it did allow us to service our customers capably and with good documentation, get them what they needed.
Cool. Now, the methodology for developing product, obviously, and correct me if I'm wrong, from your description, the initial character shows. It's you guys developing the characters, developing the program, going to the shows, saying this is what we have to offer. Whereas with the dark rides, with the exception of the Ghostbusters one, it sounds almost more like it's a consultation with the potential client about what are the client's needs and trying to develop something specific for their location. Am I getting the differences in the approach to design correct there?
Correct. I mean, they can select from rides that we've previously designed and own the rights to those designs. And once we had developed a portfolio of what I call existing attractions, they could buy from that, or they could hire us to design them a custom one. We would enter into, in the early days, a design contract with the intent to build. Now we call it a letter of intent. But it's a method to fund that creative on the initial end and come up with the concept, come up with the storyboards, the renderings, the layouts, the plan, and the price. Try to design it to the client's budget, and then enter into a contract to build it.
Interesting. Now, when you're doing something, let's say, like you talked about the pirates and the pistoleros, those are relatively generic, if you will, from an IP standpoint. Obviously, you're keeping certain rights, or I'm guessing the names of the rides might be split then with the theme park if it's supposed to become an exclusive to the theme park. But what happens when you branch off and start doing licensed things like you have a SpongeBob SquarePants, Scooby-Doo, and so forth? How does that work? I mean, is the design of the ride, let's say the layout of the ride, tied then to the intellectual property in some way? Are you still free to essentially reuse the design, just retool the figures for a different theme? How does that work from a product development and from an IP standpoint?
Well, you're right. We developed our own, and then we would have, well, I'll tell you how it happened with Scooby-Doo. We developed those first two Ghost Blaster attractions, and I had the people from Cedar Fair say, we like this Ghost Blasters, and it wouldn't take that much to convert this same concept into a Scooby-Doo. So we started developing it into a Scooby-Doo themed instead of just a generic Ghost Blasters. And it took off, and they put them in all their parks. So when it came, the park has to have the license in the end. It can't just be the marketing aspects of this ride. Initially, we did our first IP. It was with the Care Bears. We worked with a license agreement that allowed us to incorporate the license into our sales price. It was an animated musical show. It wasn't a dark ride. And in those days, licensing was a lot easier and less complicated and more negotiable than it is today. But now we're working with Nickelodeon. We've worked with Warner Brothers. We've worked with Sony. We've worked with some of the biggest ones, and developing the process of how to handle those licensors, and appropriately dealing with the customer's desires and the license restrictions. We're doing it all the time, and our people are really good at it. Communication is key, and obviously being able to execute once you've got the opportunity to is also key. We are working on another SpongeBob right now, and another licensed property. We did Uncharted in Spain with our first dark coaster, and we hope we can do more dark coasters down the road, because the coaster is king in this industry, particularly the regional park. And climate is real, and the climate issues, and the seasons have elongated as far as Christmas and Halloween. Indoor attractions are bound to be attractive soon, and I'm hoping sooner than later. But we're hoping to ride that a little bit as well in the future.
Interesting. Now, obviously, a dark coaster, as opposed to a dark ride that's on a flat plane, is going to incorporate a whole different level of infrastructure. Or is it that much more complicated to basically put the whole thing on a coaster? I mean, how high are we going with these indoor coasters?
Well, Uncharted was a pretty sophisticated Intamin coaster, but it's a trick coaster, and it was key that the tricks were developed before they started turning it into a dark ride experience. But with the new abilities to drop a track, rotate a track, stop a car, accelerate the car, do the tricks that they're able to do, go backwards, then it's still a major ride. So your emphasis shifts to the pre-show, to setting up the show, to creating the story experience in the queue, to expanding the entertainment value out in that area of the attraction, and then complementing it in the 1 minute that you've got for the thrill. And we would have done a lot more if we were Universal or had a bigger budget for even Uncharted. But most of that, we had some practical animation and some effects in there, but some large screens and projections took up the majority of the presentation of show in the coaster itself. Because you're right, you got to find a sky hook somewhere to hang a speaker or hang a light. It's not easy when you're just in a huge big box.
Definitely. Now, and you mentioned now the pre-show, which is in many cases just as important as the show almost, because you're going to spend a lot more time in that line than you will in the show. A lot of that, those, at least the ones I've been through by going through the parks, end up being a lot of screens with video nowadays. Are you guys also developing those animations in-house, or is that something that you're farming out to outside providers?
We're farming that out to outside. We're controlling it and managing it and producing it, but we work with other CGI companies to produce our digital animation. We have digital animators on staff, but they're not. These guys have Indians and Chinese and people working in different areas to produce it for them, as well as their own staff of people, and that's what they specialize in, and that's who we use.
Gotcha. Now, and that, sorry, I'm really, really fascinated by this idea of having to coordinate all these different factors. So if you've got a theme park, they know, okay, this is where we're going to put it. This is how many square meters we have and so forth. You then have to come up with an idea for the ride. It has to fit with the intellectual property that they want to graft onto it. And at the same time, you're thinking about, okay, we got to get the story right. We got to do all this, but also balancing it with that. What is the development time currently for a theme park ride for you guys?
It kind of depends on what other things we're working on, Carl. But if it's a relatively standard attraction, we can typically do it in less than a year and a half, 12 months to 14 months. When it was Justice League Battle for Metropolis, we did 7 of those in 3 years for Six Flags. They were all major attractions. And the only way we could do it, of course, is the fact that they were similar to each other. But still a lot of production in that for everyone involved. The ride vendors, we always work with another ride manufacturer. We don't build the rides themselves, but we select the right ride. No, we decided early on we're in the show business, and we need to select the right ride company to work with us to generate the capacity and the experience that we're looking for. But we use a variety of suppliers for that. Italian and from the Netherlands and America, depending on the application.
So you guys would do the design work. You would develop the animatronics still. The physical animatronics are still being developed by you guys. And
we're doing all show control, animation control, special effects production, animatronics production, some of the sets, but here, even though we have a scenic department, it's smarter to work with when you're dealing with multi-million-dollar scenic budget, to work with a local supplier who can work with our designs. We do all the design from concept to full design documentation, and then submit that for bid to a variety of potential suppliers, and then select the one we want to work with.
Gotcha. Now, you've seen shifts in the market in the past from, we talked about the Chuck E. Cheese's of this world. We've got the theme parks. There's got to be a shift at some point, because a lot of talk nowadays is about how theme parks like Disney have gotten extremely expensive. You talked about the consolidation of the regional theme parks away from family-run operations to a lot of franchised, a lot of consolidation in the market. We also have massive explosions of availability of digital entertainments like downloadable video games at home and streaming and so forth. Are there any up-and-coming markets that you've already started to serve or are looking at that might also be potential markets for animatronics and the type of entertainment that you're producing?
Yeah, we're expanding. Sometimes you can produce a game experience in particular without having a ride system to accompany it, and that would certainly reduce the cost greatly. But it's not a dark ride any longer, but it now takes a smaller footprint. It may be applicable for FEC, the right kind of, or a smaller park that can't afford to build a big building but have 1,000 or 2,000 square feet somewhere, and don't have the capacity demands that a major attraction would require. So we are continuing to expand our product offerings. We have a broad range of dark ride availabilities, from the small, all practical pistoleros to the very large projects that we're now doing for some of our customers.
Gotcha. And the internationalization of the clientele is, and you talked about the difficulties in getting a design to work in different markets, like China, for example.
Well, particularly a musical show for kids. I mean, that's just it was hard for me anyway. Does the hokey pokey work in China? I don't know, but it works everywhere in America. So,
well, I mean, and cultural touchstones. I mean, I got to ask. There's got to be, over the period of 40 years, taste change, musical taste change, expectations of questions of violence and so forth change. How difficult or easy is it for you guys to adapt to that? And what kind of conversations do you have with theme parks about the longevity of a project? And, okay, we're investing this much in this dark ride. How long is it going to last? How long is it still going to be attractive, and so forth? Are those considerations in the design process?
Well, you just have to design something that's evergreen, to tell you the truth, Carl. I mean, these rides are, one of the things we have going for us is that people still line up to get on a real bad dark ride because they like sitting down in an air conditioned, and it's a different attraction than the roller coaster and other things that are offering. We knew that going in. If they'll line up for a bad dark ride, they'll certainly enjoy ours because we were a way step ahead. And the same as today's philosophy. The musical shows were much more culturally sensitive. And we often, when we dealt with overseas clients, we'd ask them to produce the soundtrack so that we didn't deal with that culture, just didn't have that in China. And the one example I gave you. But in a dark ride, we try to use universal themes for the most part. The IPs make it a lot easier because they're generated by whatever the movie or the television show experience, and you're kept within those confines as you move through the project one way, whether it's in Korea or whether it's in Connecticut. And so that hasn't been a big issue. Dealing with Egyptian themes or pirate themes or other themes that are for every culture successful is how we've been able to overcome that.
Gotcha. Makes perfect sense. So the complexity of the animatronics obviously has increased over the years. The complexity of what you can control has increased. The programming of all of this, I mean, have you guys, not just the hardware, but you must have had to develop your own software tools, languages, coding to be able to program this, or is there some kind of universal standard inside the industry for programming an animatronic?
No, the guy that is the longest, besides me, that's been with me the longest time is my head programmer. He's also a tech, but he started in the technical department, but as an artist, he's my electronic puppeteer, if you would. When it comes to breathing life into a machine, he's good at it, and he's been with me for over 40 years. We're training others, though. When it came to software development of code style, and that became more prevalent when we started dealing with interactive video and more sophisticated interactive devices, more than the art of the animation. I mean, I've always been convinced that it's not, again, less is more often with animatronics, but people are always going to judge it by the way it looks. And so 90% of our emphasis is making sure the characters look great and perform well in whatever they do. And I'm not trying to move the pinky finger as much as I am the emotional dial on the audience. Recognizing that I'm not necessarily an animator, but an entertainer was a key transition in my own psyche in order to make sure that we provided that entertainment every time we stepped up to the plate.
Now, you've mentioned the interactive video a couple of times. Now, what exactly do you understand under that concept? Because I think different industries might view that differently.
Well, when Disney came out first with Buzz Lightyear, it was an infrared practical ride. But Toy Story Mania was all video interactivity, no animatronics except for the character in the queue. And it was wildly popular. So we recognized when they introduced video gaming into a dark ride so successfully that we were going to have to as well. And when Universal came out with the 3D video Spider-Man, it opened up a whole new interest in having the two blended together, a believable escape into an environment and scenery that was seamlessly blended with 3D video. It wasn't interactive, but if we could take that concept and make it interactive, then that's exactly what we did with our Justice League Battle for Metropolis, incorporating video interactivity into a dynamic ride system with 3D video and blended sets from practical. I think that's our real competitive advantage. There are other people who are building interactive ride experiences but don't know how to build animatronics and haven't focused on gags and special effects and the things that make dark rides special, in our opinion, and longer lasting. So 3 weeks ago, I visited one of the first dark rides I developed, the Mine of Lost Souls in Canopy Lake. All practical, probably 25 or 30 animatronic figures in there, no projections whatsoever. It has become an icon in their park. They won't let me change it because they say people will complain about it. I want to upgrade it, but they won't let me do it.
Oh, wow. Is it still running on the same old background hardware? I mean, still tape and everything else?
Yep.
Wow. I mean, what happens if the tape rips? I mean, do you even still have the facilities to create a backup, to create a new copy?
We've got it all. Ah,
awesome. Now, so when you're doing the interactive video, so let's say, and unfortunately, I only saw a couple of pictures of the Justice League one. I've been on the Spider-Man ride multiple times at Universal, and it's a phenomenal experience. The mixture, I mean, that scene when you're falling down and you think you're flying up and then you're falling down, and it's physical lights of the buildings going by. It's just it takes your breath away. But in the Justice League one, I believe it's a light gun game, correct? When you're shooting at some of the characters on the screen, if I remember correctly.
You're able to project on the video your projectile and show it. It could be a laser, it could be a lob, but we're able to actually show that, and in some cases, just the laser pointer instead of the projectile that's shown on the video itself. And with using an Unreal 4 game engine, it will render. It didn't have to be pre-rendered like the first devices that we created, and it becomes a lot more user-friendly, if you would.
That was going to be my question, whether or not it was real-time rendering or if you were just superimposing elements on a pre-rendered image. But that makes perfect sense, and it really does become a video game in a dark ride environment.
Exactly right.
Is amazing. And you talked about, for example, with the Tutankhamun that you're doing, that you then have multiple endings for the experience. How big of an effect does that actually have on ride attendance? Is there any kind, or do you guys follow statistics on this, or get any kind of feedback from the theme park as to how much that affects participation on the ride?
That would be a hard thing, Carl, to not only is it difficult to get the results that you've generated from the theme parks, they're just very close-lipped about it. But we have had quite a lot of feedback. But I think you could never tell what difference this makes to if it wasn't there. I mean, how could you make that assessment? So it's a difficult one.
Okay, that's true. I have one final question, and this is a question I ask every one of my interview subjects. So looking back at your time in the industry, what is one development that you thought was going to be really big that ended up going nowhere? And what is one development that you didn't see coming that became huge?
I was convinced when we first built the Challenge of Tutankhamun as a generic IP that would be the cat's meow, that there would be a number of people that wanted that. I invested, almost lost the company over being sure that it would be sold again multiple times, never to be sold again yet. I haven't stopped trying to sell it. I don't mind telling you. And the one ride that I am embarrassed to say that I was not confident in its success, and it's hugely successful, is the Reese's Cup Fusion conversion that we did for Hershey Park. I was concerned about the story was actually created by a very capable designer, Raven's son, Lewis. I can't remember his last name at the moment, but Lewis did the design. And I was always skeptical that it would be understood by the customers. But there's not a show with a longer queue, now in its 5th year. There's not one that's more popular in the park. And I do see the queue wait for every one of them, and it delivers a good capacity. So I had to eat crow and apologize for those that I was a naysayer on. And I'm delighted to call it a Sally Dark ride at this stage of the game, and proudly so because of its success. But I didn't see it coming.
Awesome. John, this has been unbelievably insightful. It's been just as good as I was really hoping for, because this is an industry that I've always been a fan of, but have never been able to really get any insight into because, well, like I said, with theme parks, it's kind of a closed box. And I think that you really shone an unbelievable light on this.
Thank you, Carl. Let me tell everybody that's listening, go to our website, sallydarkrides.com, and you'll be able to experience just about all of our dark rides in video and learn a lot more about our various animatronics and show productions. Give us a look.
I hope you've enjoyed another Video Game Newsroom Time Machine interview. You can leave us comments on Twitter, Instagram, and if you like what we're doing here, drop us a couple of bucks on Patreon. All the links are in the description below.